I set one camera up on the actual roof of the car, pointing directly to Eastfield. A similar camera with a slightly wider lens I placed in the passenger side rear area of the car, looking through the window, working on the principle that if, while I was on Knapp Hill away from the car, it rained, at least one of the cameras would be sheltered and would be more likely to record properly. Set the recorders going. This was now approximately 8 minutes past 11. Carried the rest of the cameras and the equipment that went with it in a rucksack and various camera cases and several tripods, and then set about walking up Knapp Hill, which is a good 5-6 minute walk, and in the dark is not easy. You're walking through waist high thistles, stumbling through rabbit holes and tussocks and all manner of things, occasionally confronting a cow, all that sort of thing, until I reached the peak, where I'd previously established was a good vantage point not only for Eastfield and the surrounding area of Milk Hill, but also to be able to look back towards Lockeridge in case there was activity that could be seen, as obviously I'm primarily a UFO investigator, so a corn circle may or may not have occurred that evening, in my opinion, but in my expectation perhaps a UFO could have occurred. I could have filmed, as I often do, unusual flying objects. So we had the greatest field of view there, but because of being on the very peak of the hill, it was a very exposed position, so we were continually buffeted by the moderate wind that occurred that night. And then just settled down for the night on a ground sheet, just watching the field, looking around, spotting any movement, looking for any signs of anyone with a torch, anyone with an infrared illuminator, any kind of laser alignment or measuring devices, anyone that may be driving a car in an unusual fashion, any cars that can't be accounted for, any lights that may not belong to anything I've already identified when I've sat on the hill, such as the travellers and the lights from their vehicles, vehicles that are in the distance, vehicles that are travelling by, making particular note of any vehicles that may have stopped, however briefly, and using the VX2100 if any vehicle stopped to actually zoom in from the hilltop and take a few second snapshot so that the vehicles could be identified, and if there was any hoax activity, for instance, would be quite happy to identify who's hoaxing it. Hence we tried to collect all information for all events that were happening that evening, and trying to cover it in an overlapping mesh of surveillance. It was a very quiet night. Initially I thought I may be wasting my time yet again. I've spent many years and many holidays sitting on these hilltops and waiting to see if I could capture the thing I saw the years previous, and failed. This evening there was an excitation in the air. You could feel a tingling and an energy, and it led me to believe that there was a good probability of an occurrence. Furthermore, my dog had previously become extremely excited in this area whilst walking the area in the daylight. So in my mind I felt quite hopeful that something might happen. However, very little happened apart from the odd car passing by on the Alton Barnes to Pusey Road, one small car which initially seemed suspicious coming up Milk Hill, which was in fact Gary, who parked up in the car park. I filmed him pulling up in the car park because I didn't know it was Gary at the time, and he and his friend walked up the hill to behind me, and in the dark I said hello, and a little voice said, "Ah, it's Wyn." And rather like explorers of old, we met up and shook hands and said hi and shared a ground sheet. We then all proceeded to sit around, talk about the latest crop circle events of the area, and Gary was new to my equipment, so he was quite quizzical about how all these cameras worked and how the different cameras perform different functions. So we demonstrated these and used them. At approximately 1:30 we carried out our last scan. It was so very, very dark at this point. Even the image intensifier barely showed any detail at all in the fields as we swooped around. We could see that there weren't people there. There were no vehicles in the field, there were no lights. We couldn't see the field clearly. It was pitch dark. And so we sat down and continued our conversation. We became rather immersed in it and really quite excited by the concepts we were sharing, as Gary has a different view to the same issue. I come at these issues as a physicist, and Gary comes at it in a more metaphysical manner. As this occurred, we became aware of excitement. We thought it was the excitement from within ourselves throwing these concepts around, but there was definitely an anticipation of something. And then at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a flash of light, rather like a sheet lightning flash. It was a momentary, dull white flash that illuminated the entire area, and more especially East Field. Gary was quite taken by this. He said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you think the cameras have caught it?" I said, "Well, I hope the cameras are still running. We're getting near the end of the first tape change, which is a reminder. I must go down and change the tapes." The last sweep that Gary and I made was at 1:35, and the last digital still photograph we took was at 1:23 in the morning. The flash event occurred at approximately 3:13 in the morning, and the first visibility we had on CCTV tape of the circle was 7 minutes after that point. Okay, the flash was momentary. It was of the nature that if you blinked you would miss it. It was literally like a lightning flash. It was like a lightning flash with no thunder. It was diffused, as if somebody had a large photographic flash up in the cloud and just set it off. It illuminated the whole area. And we couldn't say any more than that. It was just simply a flash, and we discussed it momentarily. Do you think that was lightning? Do you think it was some kind of sign from above? Gary was convinced that this was actually more than a lightning flash. He intuitively felt that this was some kind of sign, and he said, "If there's one in that field tonight, I bet this is where it happened. I just feel it." As the flash occurred, we couldn't see the field, except for the momentary instance when the flash went off. We couldn't actually see any detail. It was absolutely pitch dark. And indeed, it was a little while later, Gary felt there was something in the field. He couldn't see it, but he actually felt that there was something there. And he persuaded me to pick up the camera equipment and investigate. And it was at this very point that we saw for the first time on the VX2100 that there was a very significant formation in East Field. Gary was determined that he wanted to be the first in the field. So he said, "Come on, you're the cameraman. You stay on the hill and you film me and I'll go down to the field." So he walked down the hill, he climbed in his car, and he walked into the field. And I stayed on top of the hill with the camera, I zoomed in, and I followed Gary's progress in there. He was the first man in, and he had the amazing opportunity to experience a corn circle just after it had formed and be the first person in there. There was no disturbance of any evidence at all.